Hello and welcome back to another rendition of Campus Conversations. I'm your host Aidan Dang. I'm joined with Jeremy from Year 11 and Vanessa from Year 10. And today we are joined with guest host Darren McQuade on fire safety. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. So I'll start us off. Could you provide a brief introduction about yourself?
So I work for Fire Rescue Victoria. I've worked there for over 35 years. Prior to that, I did an apprenticeship as a butcher after leaving school in Year 11. My father suggested that before joining the fire brigade, which I'd always wanted to do, that I'd try and get a trade behind me as a backup in case I didn't get selected in the fire brigade.
Yeah.
So I looked at what sort of trade I'd be interested in, and strangely enough, the guy that lived next door to us was a butcher.
Oh.
And he was a bit of a character, and I thought that's the sort of life I wouldn't mind, but a bit of a character. In fact, one day he was, my dad's lawnmower broke down, and the grass started getting a bit long. And back those days, we lived, the block behind his house was a paddock, and you had horses in there. And so Dad asked Tom whether Tom could bring one of the horses around to the backyard to eat the grass. And Tom knocked on the door. Dad opened the front door, and Tom walked the horse straight through the house. Did an apprenticeship as a butcher, finished the 4 years, and the day that I finished, I left. And 2 months later, I was in the fire brigade, which was at the time the Metropolitan Fire Brigade, which became Fire Rescue Victoria almost 4 years ago.
What made you want to get into being a firefighter?
Yeah, well, probably even back before, in school, my dad was a volunteer firefighter with the Country Fire Authority, probably, from when I was born. And so I followed Dad, as most kids do, follow their dad, and went to the fire station and just became interested in firefighting. They had a junior fire brigade there where, even kids that are 11 years old could join. And so I joined the fire brigade as a volunteer, and really kind of enjoyed that lifestyle and a bit of, I suppose adrenaline in a way in what they do. And so that got me the interest in being a firefighter as a career. And it was reinforced, I guess, when I was butchering. I could tell you even today on Mondays, butchers break down the beef. On Tuesday they do the lambs. Wednesday they make the sausages, and Thursday, Friday, and Saturday they just sell stuff. So
is that for every butcher?
Mostly shop butchers. It's changed a lot over the years. From a lot of shop butchers have closed because supermarkets have kind of dominated. So, but I went from a job where I knew exactly what I'd be doing pretty much every hour of every day. To a job where you had no idea what you're going to be doing in 2 minutes' time. And so that was really attractive to me. And because of my experience as a volunteer in the CFA, I kind of knew what I was getting into. And I thought, well, I love doing it. Why not get paid for it? Someone once said, if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so, for me, that was probably true.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay, next. How is Victoria's fire service currently structured?
Really good question. So if I can just go back 4 years ago. So the Metropolitan Fire Brigade had been around since 1891, covered, as the name suggests, the metropolitan part of Melbourne. And outside of that boundary was the Country Fire Authority. And as the population grew, the boundary of the metropolitan area the fire brigade boundary didn't really grow. So the Country Fire Authority started putting fire stations with career staff, not just volunteers, but with career staff who were there 24/7 around the Metropolitan Fire Brigade boundary. And then back in 2020, or a bit prior to that, the government decided that they would reform the fire services. And so they amalgamated what was the Metropolitan Fire Brigade with all of the 36 career-staffed stations of CFA, which were the outer metro stations, but also large regional centres like Bendigo, Ballarat, Geelong, Mildura, etc. And so they call that Fire Rescue Victoria.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Fire Rescue Victoria covers a big part of Melbourne, plus those regional centres, and the Country Fire Authority covers the rest of it.
Okay. What does a typical response look like for someone from Fire Rescue Victoria?
So when someone calls 000, and if you've ever done that, the operator will ask you whether you want the police fire brigade or ambulance or police fire ambulance. And if you ask for the fire brigade, depending on what you're getting responded to or what the person's asking for, does determine the response. So typically for any fire, if you rang up and said my house on fire or there's a paddock out the back on fire, you'll get 2 fire trucks automatically responded, mostly from 2 different fire stations.
Yep.
And then they'll respond if they see a large amount of smoke as they're en route. They can escalate the call. In other words, they can ask for more trucks to be responded even before they get there. There's a risk of doing that, which at times does happen when you get called out to a house fire. You're driving down the road and you see the smoke. You call for extra trucks, but it's a rubbish bin fire at the back of a house. So that has happened. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Is that like a lot more like aggressive looking than compared to other fires?
Yeah, look, if you see a lot of smoke, there's no harm from the person in charge of each of the trucks. There's no harm in actually calling for more help. You're better off calling them and sending them back than not having enough coming to the fire. But as the trucks turn up, they'll do an assessment of they call it a size up. So they'll do a size up of the incident to understand what's happening, what are the risks, how do we mitigate what's happening, and then, as I say, if the fire is developing, they'll call for more support, and that support can be just more of your normal sort of fire trucks, which we call pumpers, where they just they have an amount of water on them, roughly 1,300 litres of water, but a large pumping capacity, and they can hook into a fire hydrant from the street to get more water if they need it, but they've got some water on board to get started. And then we have specialist trucks, we call them appliances, but so specialist appliances that do a whole range of different tasks, so from heavy rescue, car accidents, industrial accidents, to ladder platforms, which are like those large cherry pickers, rescuing people from heights. So depending on the type of call, will determine the response. But typically when you call for the fire brigade, you'll get 2 fire trucks turn up. One of the changes to the fire brigade over the years has been the introduction of emergency medical response. And so for where the ambulance gets called to a person having a heart attack or struggling to breathe, the fire brigade will also get responded at the same time. So the ambulance is still coming. But about half the time the fire brigade gets there first, and they try to keep the person alive until the ambulance get there with more specialist training and equipment. But in those cases, you only get 1 truck. But it's unusual because you would typically ask for an ambulance, but the ambulance will respond the fire brigade. But it is confusing for people, and some people are often distraught because of what's happening to typically a family member where they know they've called an ambulance and they see a fire truck turn up. And I've experienced that where it's they're just distraught and wondering we've stuffed up sort of thing. So we just try to reassure them. It's also for us important to get the message out that when you call for an ambulance, you might actually get a fire truck as well.
Okay.
Could you highlight the importance of teamwork as a firefighter?
Sure. So firefighting inherently has some risk to it, and to mitigate those risks, there's a range of things, mostly training, protective clothing, and the equipment that we use to mitigate the risk to make it not so risky. But one of the important parts is on each of those trucks that we're talking about, each person has a particular role. So, for example, on those pumpers, the trucks that are in every fire station that respond, there'll be a person in charge, and then the driver is also the pump operator. They're the ones that get the water flowing. Whereas the other firefighters in the back, normally the ones that they will typically put their breathing apparatus on while they're in the truck. They can still do that with the seatbelt on, so that when they turn up to the fire, they're ready with their breathing apparatus on, and they'll take a hose reel or a fire hose to the fire, sometimes into the building, depending on the severity of the fire. And they're relying on the person back at the pump to make sure they've got water. Because if the water cuts off while they're inside, they're obviously at risk. So, teamwork's really important to, rely on, the training. So we know that everyone's been given, they go through a recruit course, I think it's about 16 weeks, given standard training. So everyone's done the same level of training. And then there's continuation training through their career. But that teamwork, that the person next to you, behind you, in front of you has had pretty much the same level of training as you've had. But it is a case of, you relying on them and them relying on you to be safe.
So you said that there's different parts of like a fire team, like the driver and then the two. Which one were you?
I've been all of them. Because the way the fire brigade's structured, you start off as a recruit, and then you do some continuation training, which everyone has to do to get to different levels of what we call firefighter level 1, level 2, etc. After that, or with that, you can also do some specialist courses to operate those specialist trucks that I was talking about, the heavy rescue, the ladder platform. And I did some of those specialist courses, but I was still at a firefighter rank. And then you can, and you don't have to, but you can apply to be promoted and get on a promotional course. And the first one's really to a station officer, which is a person that's in charge of the station. And so I did that in 1995. And so I was in charge of a station for 7 years, and I went to different stations. You don't just stay in the same station forever. And then after about 7 years, then I looked at getting another promotion and got on the course for the next rank, which was a senior station officer. And that a senior station officer is in charge of typically a station that has more people, more trucks, and probably an area that has increased risk, such as hospitals, universities. So did that for, how many years? About 8 years. And then I became a commander. And then you're in charge of a number of stations, up to about 12 stations. And then did that. And then in 2015 became an assistant chief fire officer. So now I run a department. So that's, I've done all of those roles. I've been, the pump operator. I've been the person with the breathing apparatus on in the, at the end of the hose line. But then became in charge of that crew, and then in charge of stations and now a department.
Wow. So any stories that have come from you being like a recruit or going up? Sorry, Jeremy. Sorry.
Oh man,
Taking his question.
Stole that from me.
What's your question?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I was gonna say what's the unique experiences that come to mind thinking about your career in the fire brigade?
Unique experiences. To be honest, there's lots, and trying to pick them out. And one of the things I regret not doing, and when I talk to people that have just joined the fire brigade, I recommend they do what I didn't do, which is keep a journal of their career and the interesting things that they experienced throughout. Because over 35 years, you forget. But some of the unique things, I think, it's access to things that most people, the general population, would never get access to. And some examples that come to mind, under the City of Melbourne, there's things called the Telstra tunnels. And so,
what are those?
Yeah, what are those?
They are, some of them are very old. So they're tunnels that cables run through underneath the city. Some of them you could drive a car through, and some of them you have to crawl through. So the older ones, and interestingly, they have street names. So when you're under the city in these tunnels, you're looking at you're literally looking at street names. When it's Collins Street and you go down that tunnel. So it's really, it's like, wow.
Yes, that's so cool. It's like an underground city almost.
It's like Disney.
Yeah. So and it still exists.
Yeah.
So went down those. I've been fortunate enough to go to Government House and sit with the VIPs. Next to me was the police commissioner, the chief commissioner, when they were doing an award ceremony. I was representing what was the Metropolitan Fire Brigade at that point, with one of our staff members getting an award. And so just being representing an organisation there. I've been fortunate enough to be involved in one incident of interest that it created a lot of media interest. It wasn't a significant fire in terms of its complexity. Which you might recall in 2017, there was a plane crashed into the DFO factory outlets at Essendon Airport.
What?
And there was 5 people who were Americans on holidays. They died, or four Americans and the pilot. So, that created a huge amount of public interest and media interest. And I was in charge of that incident. And as a result of that, there was almost bizarrely a lot of interest for the story to be told. And for me, it was obviously unfortunate. If anyone dies, and it was 5 people died. But in terms of the incident itself, it was a light plane crashed into a building. So it wasn't an interesting story, but it created a fair bit of interest to the point where I've been fortunate enough to speak in Singapore, Hawaii.
What? About that one incident?
About that one incident.
What?
Coffs Harbour, I went over to South Australia and talked to all the fire chiefs and the police commissioner about it over there. So there's things like that you don't expect that you get to do. And probably the other unique experience that I had, and I was fortunate enough back in 2010, I was working as a commander. I was working in the office of the chief officer, so he's the boss. And part of that role, it was a liaison role with our fleet department, so developing new trucks, new technology in trucks. And so from that, he asked me to go to a trade show in Germany, which is it's the world's biggest fire and rescue trade show.
Wow.
The display area is roughly 4 to 5 times the size of the MCG.
Wow.
What?
Whoa.
It's huge. So each of the pavilions, and there was 5 of them, each of the pavilions are the same size of the playing area of the MCG. It's just massive. So before I went, the guy that went back in it's every 5 years. He went in 2005. He just said, "Look, you're going to need all 5 days." I thought he was joking, but you literally do. I probably got through most of it in 4, and then I started going back to different parts. But just getting an opportunity. So I've been to plenty of places, and never would have thought when I joined the fire brigade that I'd be doing that.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned Telstra's tunnels. In what situation would you go down there?
Oh, they have fires.
Really?
So things are cables. This is not a common occurrence, but it can be that there's a fire in one of them. And just to be clear, I haven't been to a fire in one of them, but for us, one of the things we do, regardless of whether we've had a history of fires in them, we try to do inspections of places that are unusual, so that we have some awareness of what we're going into if we need to go into them. So it can be rescuing a person from there.
Okay.
So it can be, someone's collapsed down there and we've got to make access and bring them out.
Wow.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
We do drills. The Melbourne Star, which was the big Ferris wheel that's no longer operating. We would do regular drills on how to rescue people out of the pod at the top.
Yeah.
If someone if it's stopped and
how would you do that?
Well, it's through rope rescue, so like abseiling. So they set up high angle rescue. So there are specialist teams firefighting teams that do that work. So that's one of the specialist trucks and one of the courses that firefighters can do. So one of the really good things about the job is that you can do a whole range of different jobs within a job.
Wow.
So you can have a long career and do lots of different things. And I've worked all over Melbourne doing a whole range of jobs. I ran the Fire Brigade's fleet department for a bit over 3 years. Never thought I'd do that when I joined the Fire Brigade.
Yeah. Okay. So during this summer, we've had a number of bushfires occur across the state. Could you explain what causes bushfires and why fire seasons are during warmer months? So
I suppose the first bit around why there are more fires in the summer. For fires to occur, you need a fuel.
Yep.
Which is the grass or the bush.
Yep.
And it's interesting. Most people don't know that the only thing that burns is gas. So wood, don't take this literally, but literally yes, the only thing that burns is gas. So wood gives off gas when it's heated. So it's not the wood burning; it's the gas that's given off from the wood. Same with petrol. Petrol gives off vapor, which ignites. And you, not that you're going to look at it or you're going to get a chance to see it, but if you saw fuel burning, there's a gap between the liquid and the flame, and that's the vapor.
Okay.
And so the vapor has to mix. You can have too much vapor. So the reasons things explode is because if you look at LPG gas, it has an explosive range of around 2 to 10%, which means if you've got more than 10% gas in a given area volume, it won't ignite. It hasn't got enough oxygen. It's too much gas. So 2 to 10%. So what those explosions are the gas, creating that correct explosive mixture between the actual gas and the oxygen, because you need oxygen to burn something as well. So it's actually expanding so that you get that. If you've got 100% gas, the only reason it's going to ignite is when it gets down to between 2 and 10% gas to 90 to 98% oxygen. So it needs to expand rapidly to get that mixture. Back to the, so for the grass and the bush to burn, it needs to produce gas, and that happens when it's heated. And so the hot days and the long, dry summers, that gas is given off. On a hot day, if you're walking through the bush, you can smell the eucalyptus.
Yeah.
Or the eucalypt. So, and that, so that's occurring on a hot day because the gases are given off at higher temperatures.
Yep.
And so for fires to burn, you need fuel, oxygen, and heat. And so, if you're trying to light a piece of paper, the paper is the fuel, you need oxygen, and you need a spark, or a match, or a lighter, or whatever, to burn it. So back to, summers, they create more of that heat and dryness of the fuel that might burn. If it's wet timber, it's not going to burn because it doesn't get hot enough. And when you put water on a fire, that's removing the heat by cooling it. Now there's the second part. Well, there's the first part of the question, which what was that one?
So we've explained why
the
fires.
summer's worse.
Yes.
What causes them?
Yes.
So it's a variety of things. Lightning strikes. So we do get, they're called dry lightning strikes. So lightning doesn't always occur, rain doesn't always occur with lightning. Sometimes there's dry lightning strikes, particularly where in the bush and the parks, not so much bush where people live, but in national parks and public parks. Those dry lightning strikes often aren't seen by someone. They're not reported quickly. So they actually develop to a point where someone sees a column of smoke going up before they ring 000.
Yep.
So they've already grown some size before anyone's responded. And by the time they get to that point, it's grown even more. So they're hard to put out. So that dry lightning strikes is one. The other is trees falling on power lines. So, typically on hot, windy days, and so the combination of heat, low humidity, and strong winds are that sort of prime recipe for bushfires.
Yep.
And so the winds, they'll blow trees, branches fall off a tree, hit the power lines hit the ground create a spark, and a fire starts. And one of the other reasons is humans.
Yeah.
So people, I was always told the three main causes of fire are men, women and children, which is probably right.
Yeah.
So people do that either deliberately or accidentally. And that's why we have rules around total fire ban rules where you can't do what you'd normally do on a total fire ban without a permit.
Yeah.
So that's just to reduce the chance of a fire starting.
Could that be like smoking a cigarette and tossing it out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
For sure.
Wow. I think you just confused us a bit with the gas that comes from leaves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was completely new information.
Yeah, look, and it's people just think, wood burns, paper burns, petrol burns. They do, but it's actually the gas or the vapor that's burning.
How easily can man-made things like cigarettes or a lighter accidentally start a fire? How quickly does that happen?
Look, when they're used correctly, that's unusual for them to start a fire. They're either misused or discarded. When I worked in the city, I worked as a senior station officer in our headquarters station in East Melbourne, so it's the busiest station in Victoria. And I remember one day I went to 10, so our day shift is 10 hours, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and night shifts are 6 p.m. through to 8 a.m. So in a 10-hour day, I went to 10 rubbish bin fires in the city.
Wow.
And they are typically lunchtime and about 5:05 in the afternoon, which is when everyone's coming out of the office building and lighting up a cigarette. Yeah, and they don't extinguish it properly. They just throw it straight in the rubbish bin.
Yeah.
The council have put more cigarette sort of disposal containers attached to the rubbish bin now.
Yeah.
So people have got an option to do it properly.
Yeah.
Extinguish it properly. But yeah, it's if they're used properly, they're low risk.
So I know in Australia, typically, right, we have this controlled fires. How beneficial is that to preventing bushfires?
Look, obviously if you've burnt out an area of land, you reduce the fuel for the next fire. So if it's just burnt yesterday, it's not going to burn again.
Yeah.
The regrowth, whether that's grass, needs to regrow and then dry off, and that'll burn. But also the leaf litter, the twigs, everything that drops off the trees over the years, those areas that haven't burnt for a long time, they'll have a massive fuel load. So if fuel load sort of worked out in the bush through tonnes per hectare. So how many tonnes of material that burns for each hectare is a measure of fuels for fires. So places that haven't had a fire for a long time will have quite a high fuel load. There are, Forest Fire Management Victoria is not a well-known fire service because they're not necessarily a support public. So if you call a fire brigade for your home, you either get the CFA or Fire Rescue Victoria. Forest Fire Management Victoria manage fires in parklands, so and they do preventative or planned burning. So they'll have areas strategically located in terms of, we've got a township here and we've got bush around the township to the northwest, which is typically the direction that a bushfire would come, because most of the hot weather is you get strong northwesterly winds, so they're the worst days. So they try and protect the homes from the bush and separate, create a barrier or a buffer between the homes and the bush that's unburnt, and they'll burn off a section so that can't reburn, I guess.
Yeah.
And they'll do, the problem is there's so many thousands of square kilometres of bush. Yeah. They can only burn so much of it per year, but they try to do it strategically, where the most risk is. And the other problem with that, even though they might have targets of how much area per year they want to burn, it relies on a fairly narrow window between when it's too hot and risky to when it's raining and it won't burn. So this sort of autumn, kind of almost now is when they're starting to think about that planned burning program.
Okay. So, like with fires, people typically associate them being bad. Is there any case like a fire can be good with, like, I guess, in the bush rather than like in the city?
Yeah, well, I was just about to say before you added that bush bit, but we teach kids, and we have a program called Fire Ed, and we teach prep or foundation year about good fires and bad fires. So we candles on a birthday cake, we say, it's a good fire. A barbecue is a good fire, and then we show bush burning, and we go, that's a bad fire. So we try to teach the kids there are good fires and bad fires. In the bush, the risk is greater simply because it's harder to contain. So, there are rules around making sure it's cleared, 3 metres all round of any other combustible material.
Yeah.
But, if you're lighting, if I use an example, even if you had a barbecue, a solid fuel barbecue, which is like timber or coals, not just a gas barbecue, but because gas, it's a solid fuel that can either fall out of the barbecue, whereas gas, it's not falling out of a barbecue. So it's a gas one or an electric one's obviously safer. So a solid fuel one where you're using wood or coals is riskier. Yep. Typically, you don't have gas. You might have some in parks or designated parks that the public can access for barbecues, but they're not in the bush. They might be in a regional town, for example.
Yeah.
So lighting fire in the bush is inherently risky, particularly in the summer.
Yep.
In the winter, when the fuel won't burn, it's low risk.
Yeah.
But where the materials on the ground can burn, it's fairly high risk. And there's rules around when if you can and can't burn or have barbecues in the bush, but certainly it's risky in the bush having a barbecue.
Yeah, definitely.
Firefighters have other response roles than just the obvious, such as a medical response. Could you elaborate?
Yes, I mentioned before about emergency medical response. So we've been trained. We've been trained in that first response support or life support for people who are suffering from particular categories of illness. So, having a heart attack and choking. So there's sort of non-breathing, the life-threatening incidents will get responded in addition to the ambulance service.
Yeah.
And so that has proven to be a program that's saved hundreds of lives.
Yeah.
Because I think I might have said on average, we probably get there first about half the time.
Yeah.
And so just by providing that quick life support until the ambulance get there, as I say, with higher skills, more advanced equipment, we're just trying to keep them alive with oxygen and defibrillators. And that's been a really successful program. So, that's in addition. That started for us in about the year 2000 or 2001. And every firefighter that goes through recruits now does that training. So, everyone's got that qualification. That's probably the biggest change to the fire service in terms of the service we provide to the community. Not just a fire and rescue. There's the emergency medical response. Like any first responder job, there are things you go to that you don't really want to go to and see. We've all done that. They stay with you for a long time. I remember the first fatality was a car accident in High Street, Preston. I can still picture it. And that would have been, I don't know, 1989 maybe.
Wow.
Do you remember that?
No.
I wasn't even a thought.
2009.
Your parents would have been young.
Yeah.
So, I remember those. There's other incidents, and mostly car accidents, with bones sticking out, limbs that are going in the wrong direction. You remember them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for a lot of people, that cumulative effect of what they see has an impact on their mental health.
Like desensitization.
I'm not. I don't. So I wouldn't say desensitized, but it can have an impact on post-traumatic stress. So that cumulative effect of seeing things, and people, particularly those that are on our heavy rescue units, that go into car accidents and removing, often deceased people. Yeah. But also often people who are just severely injured, still alive. Sometimes that's worse because they're screaming out for help.
Yeah.
So that has an impact on you. It even impact. I remember, in my volunteer capacity, I'd been strangely enough, people question why, but apart from being a career firefighter, I still maintained that volunteer component and responded with my volunteer brigade on Black Saturday in 2009. And, some of the very clear memories of some things that happened there, where people are asking, you get pulled over by someone asking us to go and help, his wife and child. But we had, say orders, but we had directions to go and help, what we were told was 100 people on a, surrounded by fire on a sports oval. So, you've got to make decisions about, well, am I helping this person or am I helping these 100 people? So those sort of things stick with
tough.
you. You can't. You got to make a call. You can't just sit there and go, "Oh, this is a bit awkward."
Yeah.
I'm not sure the outcome of his family, but they're things that kind of stay with you. And for some people, unfortunately, that has an impact longer term on their, and sometimes short term, on their mental health. And that's really tragic because it's that can be lifelong. Because of the service they're provided. But that's the negative side of what we do, but that's a lot of first responders, whether that's ambulance, police, fire brigade, SES, etc. So, but there's some really good parts to it that the other thing that sort of is the family, the firefighting family is around the world. I could walk into a fire station anywhere in the world and be welcomed.
Wow.
And you say, I'm a firefighter from Melbourne. Yeah, come in. So that's really good. Yeah.
So we've seen an increase in lithium battery fires in the news as of recent. If someone were to have a device that caught on fire, what should they do?
Samsung phones.
Well,
really?
Yeah. Okay. I have a Samsung.
Yeah, same.
First thing to do is to try and get away from it. Now, that can be difficult because there's videos that I watched as recently as yesterday where, they're like e-cigarettes in someone's pocket or a battery pack in a backpack that just exploded without warning. Yeah. And so, an e-cigarette or something in your pocket that explodes, it's burning your thigh. And the only way to stop that is to put your hand in there and take it out. The choices are not good. So, prevention's the key part. If it catches fire, get away from it as quickly as possible. If it's in your pocket, that's challenging.
Yeah.
No amount of do this, do that's going to help. You're just going to do what you think's right at the time.
Yeah.
But the key thing with lithium-ion batteries, and it is a growing problem around the world, is that it's so rapid that there's virtually no warning. It can give off some crackling, popping noises, and within a second it can be giving off toxic gas and just pretty much explode with shrapnel. The bigger the device, the worse. So a phone can catch fire.
Yeah.
Scooters, and so electric scooters and e-bikes, they're problematic simply because they're a bigger battery. People, unlike mobile phones, people don't they don't tinker with a battery in a mobile phone. But some people are trying to build their own lithium-ion batteries to put on a push bike. And so when you're not buying or using original products, it creates a greater risk. The other thing with the e-bikes and scooters, they're more prevalent in urbanised areas, inner city areas used by people who are trying to use bikes rather than sitting in traffic. And they often live in apartments, and to charge their bike, they need to take it up in the lift to their apartment to charge it.
Yeah.
And there's videos showing people in the lift when it explodes.
Whoa.
There's not many options once the doors close.
Yeah.
So that's another growing risk. And so what do? Not many really good options. Try and get that door open as quickly as you can. If you can get away, toxic smoke, in any sort of smoke, the best thing to do is get down as low as you can, because smoke rises.
Yeah.
But if it's exploding and there's shrapnel, and you're in a lift, there's not many places you can go. So the choices aren't good.
Yeah.
Prevention's the best thing. So try not to have it happen in the first place. And that's about using original products. So don't buy dodgy, because something looks like a particular brand's charger, but it's a quarter of the price, it's probably not an original product.
Yeah.
It's probably a rip-off. So maybe not buy the rip-off.
Yeah.
Buy the original. Store them, or if they're damaged, probably get them checked. If they're damaged, distorted, that's when the battery can be exposed. And when it's exposed, particularly to air, that's problematic. So, or the inside of the battery exposed to air. And, one of the things we say, and not everyone does it, is that, charge them on non-flammable surfaces. So, and charge them, if you're going to charge them overnight, charge them in a room that's got a smoke alarm. So don't charge it, on your bed, under your pillow, ideally not in your bedroom, and don't put it, you charge it in your bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like next to my desk.
Right next to my head.
Right next to it.
Looking around, no, 1 out of 6.
Really? What do you charge your phone, Dexter?
In the
Really?
living room.
What?
Great.
The best out of us.
Well done. Have you got a smoke alarm in the living room? Oh, well done. Can you get a
Badge?
Yeah,
Have a badge.
Yeah. So if you're going to charge them, try to charge them when you're awake.
Yeah.
Smoke alarms detect smoke when people are asleep. Well, they detect smoke at all times, but you can't smell when you're asleep.
Yeah.
Not sure if you knew that, but a lot of people don't know. You can't smell when you're asleep. So a smoke alarm will alert you early enough or quickly enough for you to use the normal exit path, the front door, the back door, whatever. So wherever you charge your lithium-ion battery device, put a smoke alarm in there. Try to charge it when you're awake, and charge it on a non-flammable surface. So don't put it on the carpet or on the bed.
Yeah.
So prevention's the best thing, but they're really difficult fires to put out.
Yeah.
They need is that your next question?
Oh, no, it was something I was just going to personally ask. Like,
Right.
how dangerous are those fires? Like, are they hard to put out?
So one of the things with firefighters, we can read minds where you can see the question coming. So they are really hard to put out. And the strategy is either let it burn, just burn out, or put copious quantities of water on it. And one of the problems that the society and certainly emergency services and waste disposal facilities are grappling with at the moment is that these fires, we could put it out and they can reignite a week later.
Wow.
And so transporting them, we turn it. So typically up until, my career, up until a few years ago, you put something out, you touch it, it's cold, happy days. We go home and everyone's happy. Now we can put it out and go back to the station and get another call, that day, the next day, a week later. And so transporting and getting them recycled or disposed of properly is challenging for us. And it's challenging councils and the EPA and a whole bunch of organisations.
Wow.
It's a significant issue. The issue around putting them in lifts. I think I'm right in this. London, I believe, has banned them from public transport.
Yeah.
There'll be videos where they've ignited and the people on a train.
Yeah.
You've got a bit of space to move away on a train, but
They're usually packed.
that's
crowded
it.
trains,
It's, or a tram. That it's problematic, and so governments and agencies like ours are, looking at a whole range of things. Should we be trying to legislate to ban them on in certain areas, whether it's public transport or whatever? But there's also the societal benefits of them.
Yeah,
we're not going back. We're not going back and moving away from products that use lithium-ion batteries because it helps in a whole range of things. So it's a growing issue that we're doing a fair bit of work with, and that work we learn. I talked about firefighters around the world as a bit of a brotherhood or sisterhood. We work with other agencies. We had some guests from the Fire Department of New York a few weeks ago talking about this issue, and they've had about, I think it was the last year, 18 people died.
Whoa.
Simply from lithium-ion battery caused fires. Now in Victoria we have on average 18 people die in house fires every year. And they had 18 people, there's a much bigger population, but they had 18 people solely from lithium-ion batteries. And interestingly, only about a week or two ago in New South Wales, I think this is the first reported fatalities. There were 2 in a house fire caused by lithium-ion batteries. So it's just starting.
Yeah. Wow. So I know we also see like campaigns related to smoke alarms. Like, what advice could you give about smoke alarms in homes?
One of my favourite subjects. Look, smoke alarms, I just sort of touched on it before. They're really, it's interesting when most people think about the buildings they work in or school, those buildings are quite heavily regulated in terms of fire safety. You'll have to have, depending on the size of the building, fire sprinklers. You'll have to have fire hose reels, fire extinguishers, exit signs. In a home, the only thing you need is a smoke alarm.
Yeah.
So they're not, and we're trying to change that. We're trying to make homes safer, but to do that, it's going to cost money, and no one wants to add to the cost of homes. But smoke alarms are the single required fire safety device in a home. But the current legislation in Victoria just requires a smoke, and it depends on when the house was built. So there's some, 1st of August 1997 was a house built before that. You just need a smoke alarm with a 9-volt battery. Those batteries last about 1 year. And you need it between the smoke alarm between the bedrooms and the rest of the house. And typically that's in a hallway.
Yeah.
If it was built after 1997, you need that smoke alarm needs to be hardwired. So not just the 9-volt battery, but it has to be connected to the electricity. So an electrician needs to do that. Our current recommendations, based on our research, which shows that 72% of people who die in house fires die in either the bedroom or the living room. And so our recommendation, which we're trying to turn into legislation, is that everyone has smoke alarms in every bedroom and every living room, as well as the hallway, which is what you currently require by law. And that's on each level. You need one on each level. Yeah. And we're also trying to get the requirement for smoke alarms in garages, because there's been fatalities in garages. The fatalities were in the upstairs bedroom, where a fire started in the garage. But because there's no smoke alarm, the fire grew to quite large before the people upstairs realised there was a fire.
Yeah.
And by the time they realised, they couldn't actually get downstairs. And in New South Wales, there was, I think it was 4, and in Victoria it was 3 people died. Same scenario. Wow. So we're trying to get smoke alarms in garages that are connected to a home.
Yeah.
And the other thing with the smoke alarms that a lot of people don't know, there's a few things. One is that you can now buy smoke alarms with 10-year lithium batteries.
Wow.
Safe lithium batteries.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just don't tamper with them. But because everyone's had the smoke alarm go off in the middle of the night where it beeps, with a flat battery. You can buy smoke alarms that have batteries. You can't actually change the battery. They last for 10 years.
Wow.
So you don't have to change the battery every year when it beeps in the middle of the night. And the other feature, which is the best type of smoke alarms, one with a 10-year battery, but also interconnected through Bluetooth, so that when one operates, they all operate. Particularly if you've got, you won't, I'm sure, have young children that are sleeping in a different room to the parents. You want the parents to be alerted. So let's say there's a fire in a child's room, you've got the door closed. The smoke alarm in the parents' bedroom would go off as well. So they all go off in the whole house.
Yeah, that's smart.
That's really
So
cool.
10-year batteries, interconnected, and you can buy those from hardware stores. They're not cheap, to be honest. They're roughly $90-odd. Yeah. But if you've got 3 bedrooms and a living room, that's less than $400. That's pretty cheap life insurance.
Yeah.
And most people that die in house fires don't have working smoke alarms. So make sure they're tested once a month. Try to get ones with 10-year lithium batteries and that they're interconnected.
How do we test our smoke alarms?
Good question. So
Light a fire.
Yeah, I was going to say, put a bit of smoke under it, see if it goes off.
That would work. Not recommended. That would work. So every smoke alarm will have a test button that is, as you look up at the smoke alarm, it's looking at you. So there'll be a little button, often there in the centre of the smoke alarm.
Yep.
You grab a broom or something, like a rolling pin or something that reaches, and you just hold that button pressed for about roughly 2 seconds, and it'll beep. Generally, it's 3 beeps. So do that every month, and you're ensuring that that's working, and being there effectively to save your life.
Wow. Okay, so before we end off, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to do your job or get into being a firefighter?
What advice? You need to know the fire service fairly well. So you need to do as much research as you can to understand the role that you're trying to do. And I've sat on an interview panel for recruits or people that want to be recruits. And it's clear whether someone's actually done the research. And as a person wanting to employ people, you've got a choice between someone who actually knows what the role entails and someone that doesn't. You're kind of going to go with the one that knows what it's about. So that's important. And a lot of information can be gained from our website. There's also, for females, we encourage females to look at firefighting as a career. There's, it's only about, in Fire Rescue Victoria, it's only about 5% female firefighters. So that, it'd be good to see that percentage increase. There is a women's support network. So if there's any females that are interested, they can contact Fire Rescue Victoria and ask to be put in contact with the women's support network. And they're female firefighters who will provide you, with whatever support you need. So they're probably the key things. What I'd say, I think for me, when interviewing people who want to be firefighters, one of the things that we like to see is that someone has a reasonable amount of life experience. So while I was fortunate to join when I was 21, it would be unusual to see someone join at that age now. I think having someone that understands, the world, is a bit more worldly than someone who's 20 or 21, is beneficial. And that's why getting, although I did get a trade, but I was 17 when I started. So, but having another job, and I think whatever job, one of the things I talk to young people about their career is whatever you're doing, do it well. So I don't care if you're working at Macca's or, you're a cleaner or, serving at the local petrol station, whatever it is you do, do that well and it will be noticed. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. Do it well and people will notice. The manager will notice. And having been a manager and recruiting people in a whole bunch of different roles, what we're looking for, I see interviews as a risk management process. We're trying to get someone who's low risk, that they're easy to work with, they've got a good work ethic, they've got the right attitude. I think we can teach people the role. We can't teach people attitude. That's really hard. So, Yeah, I think the key is about, and the reason I say whatever you're doing, do it well, is because you're going to get a really good reference at the end of that.
Yeah.
When you're trying to join the fire brigade and you've got a great reference, about your work ethic, turning up on time, being dressed properly, great attitude, serves customers, respects people, works with diverse communities, all those sorts of things are well regarded. So I think it's about, firstly around understand the job, go and talk to firefighters, knock on the door and say, listen, can I talk to you about the job? You'll typically find, and certainly at the bigger fire stations, there will be someone that is reasonably new.
Yeah.
Because they send them to those stations to support their training and progression. So, go to some of the bigger stations, knock on the door and ask if there's someone that's, been through recruits recently, and have a chat to them, talk to them about the whole process, the interview, the physical, get physically fit.
Yeah.
Do things that help your CV. So whether that's community groups that you're involved in, we want to see that people want to help the community. So if you're involved in the community, whether at whatever club it might be, that always helps. Yep.
Wow. So I think that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Thank you, Darren, for coming in, talking to us. And thank you all for listening to Campus Conversation. I'm your host, Aidan with Jeremy and Vanessa. And that's all for today. Thank you.